Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to 5 Ways in Which I Would Rewrite Star Trek Discovery in Retrospect. This is looking back. Hindsight is 2020, as they say. So these are 5 things that I would do to change Discovery now that I've seen the whole series. And this is not to say that Discovery sucks. I was quite a fan of it. I think it was overall a solid Star Trek show. I think it was very up and down, and there were definitely things that could have been made better. And after having seen all 5 seasons, I now see what things that personally would have made this a great show for me. Now, this is just my opinion. I also want to state I am obviously not one of the writers of Discovery. I'm just some fan. This is fan fiction 100%. If the writers themselves were to go and look back on what they would change, maybe they would change nothing. I don't know. Or maybe it would be something completely different from what I'm coming up with. Maybe your opinion is a little different from what I'm coming up with. I'm just saying, for me personally, after I've seen all 5 seasons, I would make these 5 changes, and Discovery would be one of the best Star Trek shows of all time. But these are all things that I wouldn't necessarily have come up with or have in a million years expected the writers of the show to come up with in 2017. But now that we've seen the 5 seasons and can look back at it, this is how I would rewrite it. So let's go ahead and start with my first thing. These are going to be numbered, but it's not a rating and ranking. It's not a countdown. I'm not going backwards. So, you know, in Trek culture, they do everything backwards. I'm not, even if it's not really a ranking, I'm not doing that. They will be numbered just for me to keep track of them, but it's a list, not a ranking. So here's the first thing. Let's go ahead and dive into it.
Number one, always set the show in the 32nd century.
So yes, if I had the ability to go back and rewrite Discovery with the knowledge that I have now, I would have foregone the whole 23rd century bullshit and just started the show in the 32nd century. I think that the writers did figure out that they were writing from inside this tiny little box and then they moved to the 32nd century and they opened up caverns and caverns of story possibilities. Just endless story possibilities in the 32nd century that they did not have in the 23rd century. Now, I think it did work for Strange New Worlds because they were exploring a specific era of Star Trek that we already knew about that hasn't been explored, which was Pike's Enterprise. I think there's a bunch of story possibilities there, but setting some random ship in the 23rd century with new characters, um, where do you go with that? It always seemed like a struggle, and I thought that from the beginning. I'm like, why are they doing this? So it made a lot more sense once they put them in the 32nd century. So I say, in retrospect, with hindsight, just start in the 32nd century to begin with. Skip all this 23rd century nonsense. Now you might be asking, but what about Strange New Worlds? Does that still happen? Yes, it does, but I will get to that a little later. Hold on, I'll get to that. Um, but uh, in this rewrite, I'm saying that all of the characters were born in the 32nd century. So Burnham, Stamets, Tilly, Culber, etc., etc. They are 32nd century characters, which they may as well have been by the end of the show anyways, because they were behaving as if they were always in the 32nd century. They're talking about events that happened 800 years ago as, oh, that ancient history, that was so long ago. And talking about all this knowledge, all these things of the Cardassians and the brain, and all these things that they shouldn't have really known about yet, but they were behaving as if they were 32nd century characters anyways, so just make them 32nd century characters. Uh, and then you get rid of all of that contradiction and trouble caused by having them displaced in time. Um, I say that you would have Burnham's storyline exactly the same, except that the enemy is not the Klingons. It's something different. And I'm going to get to that with my number 3. I'll tell you who the enemy should have been. Um, Not the bad makeup Klingons, not that. But other than that, her storyline is the same. Um, she is named a traitor and has to work her way up to being captain. And you keep that scene from season 5, episode 4, where season 5 Burnham meets season 1 Burnham. That scene exactly the same, exactly the same. Season 1 Burnham, exactly the same. Um, and I'll get to like the details of how it still works with someone other than the Klingons, but that'll be in my number 3. Um, but I keep that the same. Um, Mirror Universe, personally, I would keep it. Uh, I know they said in season 3 that the Mirror Universe and the Prime Universe have really drifted apart. In my rewrite, that's not a thing. I mean, that was just something they came up with as a part of an elaborate plot to get Michelle Yeoh off the show. So that's not a thing. In my rewrite, the Terran Empire uh, has risen again, and I think you show shades of gray here. I think you show that it's not that all humans are evil, all humans are good. I think that there is a faction of humans who always missed the days of the Terran Empire and wanted to bring it back, and they are successful in bringing back the Terran Empire, and that's what we're seeing here. And personally, I keep Lorca. I keep the Lorca twist. I know not everyone loved that, but this is my rewrite, so I would keep all that. Absolutely keeping Emperor Giorgio. You got to find a different way to get Michelle Yeoh off the show, but figure that out. um, yeah, you keep all of that intact, uh, in my opinion. Um, so the other big point I want to make about this always being said in the 32nd century, is the spore drive. The spore drive is 32nd century technology, not 23rd century technology. That never made any sense that they suddenly came up with this super advanced technology that no one had ever heard of. And then they travel into the future, 900 years into the future, and they possess this technology that is advanced, more advanced than the technology that they have 900 years later. Like, can you imagine if somebody traveled back from our past from 900 years ago and came to our present and like had technology that was more advanced than us? I'd be like, what the fuck? What kind of bad writers came up with this? Like, so, not saying the Discovery writers are bad, they're not, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, Whereas if it was always invented in the 32nd century, that makes more sense. And you know what makes even more sense? As it's as if the spore drive was invented as a reaction to the burn. We have no more warp drive, so we need alternate means of propulsion. In my rewrite, you'd have the different species and different organizations competing to come up with the best new way of propulsion, and this is the Federation's attempt to stay relevant, is to invent the spore drive. Does that not make like a zillion times more sense than it being invented in the 23rd century to, you know, stay ahead of the Klingons or whatever, like get a leg up on the Klingons, and then we're just gonna forget all about the existence of the spore drive for 900 years? It made no sense. This makes so much more sense. Now, the burn I will get to. This is still a thing, but it will be different. But that's my number 2 thing. I'll get to that in a few minutes here. That'll be my number 2. I'll tell you how I would change the burn. Um, but for now, know that the spore drive is a reaction to the burn, and that's why it exists. God, that makes so much more sense. It just makes almost makes too much sense. Too much sense. Um, so circling back around to Strange New Worlds, the way that it happens is timey-wimey stuff. So time travel isn't banned in my rewrite. I mean, that's dumb. Like, who's going to enforce time travel being banned? Like, who's going to stop anyone from time traveling? Or if it is banned, they do it anyways. So, because I do want to keep the references to the temporal war. That's still a thing, but time traveling being banned seems kind of silly to me. So timey-wimey stuff. So you spend not the entire season, but a few solid episodes in the 23rd century in the second season. But second season plot is probably completely different. No Red Angel bullshit. Um, Now, as for what is Burnham's connection to Spock here, um, well, if you want to, you could still have her raised by a Vulcan on Navarre, and this Vulcan could be played by the same actor, but he is a descendant of Sarek. Now, how does Sarek have descendants? Well, you could retcon some kids for Spock. I mean, if you retcon Spock's, human stepsister, then you can retcon some kids for Spock, or you can say it's from Cyborg. So she's basically a descendant of Cyborg. Or not she, not Michael herself, but the dude who raises her, who is not Sarek, but is a descendant of Sarek. And then so Burnham would have been raised in a household where Spock is put up as this deity, like this godlike figure, and then she gets to kind of meet him uh, in real life and see his flaws, and especially he will be the same as he was in Discovery. Like he's going through this shit. He's going through a hard time, and that would condense that storyline quite a bit, which it needed to be. So. Um, that's still a thing. You still have a storyline where Pike comes across a time crystal, probably not a Klingon time crystal, but a time crystal that shows him his future. And then so we still have the same storyline in Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds not changed one iota, not at all. Um, Spock is no longer Burnham's stepbrother, but that doesn't affect Strange New Worlds in the slightest. So uh, Strange New Worlds, am I rewrite? Completely intact. Um, and his discovery that is vastly different. So now let me go ahead and move on to my second thing, my number two way in which I would rewrite Discovery.
Number 2, the burn is not a mystery box.
Okay, so now getting into the second way that I would rewrite Discovery. The burn is not a mystery box. So we're changing the burn. I will also add to that the cause of the burn is not some super powerful psychic pre-pubescent Kelpian who has a temper tantrum. That's not that's not what causes the burn. But the cause of the burn in my rewrite doesn't matter. Like it's technobabble, blah blah blah. It's beside the point. Like it's not a big deal. Um, so it's not this big mystery that we have to spend a whole season figuring out what caused the burn. Everyone just knows what caused the burn. Like it's some technobabbly thing that's not that important, and everyone is aware of it. What they don't know is how to solve the burn. It seems like a scientific impossibility against the laws of physics. All of these scientists from all over the galaxy spend years and years trying to solve it, and nobody can. So eventually they say, let's find ways around the burn instead of trying to solve it because we're never going to solve it. It's hopeless. So we get the spore drive. I think you have other species, maybe with maybe the big enemy. We'll get to him at number three. Has the transwarp drive, and it's not the fucking Borg. Let me tell you that right now, not the Borg at all. Um, so maybe they have the transwarp drive. Maybe various species have various different means of propulsion. Um, and uh, yeah, so the spore, or I'm sorry, the burn, not not a mystery box. Now I could kind of go either way on whether or not you ever actually solve the burn. You could have it solved at the end of the first season. Maybe Burnham somehow contributes to figuring out the burn, and that's what starts her redemption. Although that might set her up as too much of a Mary Sue if all these scientists couldn't figure it out and somehow she does. But um, I would actually be okay with never solving the burn. And so the Spore Drive program moves forward. You're going to find other ways besides Stamets operating it or having to torture a sentient being in the tardigrade. Because remember they talked about doing that in season four, and then at the beginning of season five, they threw in a line like, "Oh, we're not doing that anymore." Like I think they do that in my rewrite. I think they do move forward with a spore drive program. If we could maybe not ever fix the burn potentially. I could kind of go either way. I could go either way on this, but it might be really interesting to be in this new age where everyone has to use different means of propulsion other than warp drive. Could be interesting. Um, that's kind of probably where I would lean toward a little bit more. Um, so yeah, I think there's a wealth of story that you can do in this world. Um, Different uh, species are going to be powerful in different ways because of what they come up with propulsion. Maybe Navarre is falling behind. Maybe the Klingons become irrelevant. We don't even see them. If, by the way, if we do see the Klingons, they're going to be the normal Klingons. um, they'll look like they did in Strange New Worlds. Maybe some updated makeup, but not like vastly different. Um, it would be interesting to see how the different species react to the post burn world. I think it would be really fascinating. All right, so speaking of the Klingons and the enemies of the Federation, let's move on to that number three where I will address that.
Number 3, make the brain the big bad from the start.
So yes, that's right. The big bad of Discovery is not the bad makeup Klingons, but it is in fact the brain from day one. Instead of pissing off half your fan base by completely changing the Klingons, giving them really awful makeup and having them talk like you excite the fan base by bringing back the brain of really popular but underexplored species, which did excite the fan base when they finally did decide to do that in season five. I wouldn't have expected them to think of this back in season one. That's why this is kind of in retrospect, hindsight, and all of that stuff. Looking back, I would have gone ahead and put the brain end from the beginning. Now, they actually slide right into that Burnham story arc from season one. I mean, it's actually kind of shocking how easily they just slip right into that storyline because when you hear Rayner describe the brain, he's talking about how, like, well, violence is the only language they know. If we want to get their respect, we have to fight. Um, when Rayner was saying all that, it reminded me a lot of what Burnham was saying about the Klingons and the whole Vulcan hello thing. So similar. So you just put the brain right in. I mean, they just slip right in very easily, and it's not rough or I mean, it just fits. It fits too perfectly because Rayner described the brain the same way Burnham described the first season Klingons. So he just put the brain in there. Um, and now we're excited to learn about the brain. Now, how much they disseminate about the brain over time would be up to them. Do they go ahead and unmask the brain in the first season and kind of soften the significance of Locke being the first unmasked brain in season five? And sorry for that actor who was very excited about that. Or you could still make it a mystery until then. You can do it either way. But I think slowly over time you develop the brain and you have a lot more time to develop them than one season. Like one season was not enough to develop the brain. I wish that they had introduced them a lot earlier. So season one, you take an enemy that was popular but underdeveloped, and you start developing them throughout the five seasons. Um, Now, when I say they would be the big bad, um, I don't think they're in every episode. They're probably the main villain in season one and season five, but uh, throughout the rest of the show, they're kind of like the Klingons in TOS or the Romulans in TNG. Like they pop in every once in a while, and you have an episode every once in a while where you're focusing on them, but they're not. Uh, the big bad. Um, but they're more significant than anything else. I think the Klingons you could brush aside. I think you could bring in like other old school aliens like the Tholians. Um, you could still have the Emerald Chain if you really want, but maybe not as Cyrus. Like, I think it makes sense to have this criminal organization rise to power in this post-burn world. Sure, but maybe not Osira. Maybe not her, but but yeah, you can have different enemies. But I think uh, the Breen are to Discovery what the Romulans were to TNG. That's how I would look at it. Um, wouldn't that be so much better? Wouldn't that be so much better? You never have this like, terrible Klingons. Now I haven't addressed the Ash Tyler of it all. Is Ash Tyler a brain in this scenario, or do you just get rid of him? Personally, I'm okay with just getting rid of him, but I don't know. I wasn't as enamored with this um, Ash Tyler is Vogue storyline as maybe some others were. I saw it coming a million miles away. I thought it was very predictable. Like, I don't hate it, but I don't think it was like, I mean, I think it's expendable. Like I think you could cut it out. If you really must keep it, yeah, sure, make Ash Tyler Breen. It doesn't matter. Like, maybe that's part of the mystery still. We don't know what the Breen look like, but they can disguise themselves as humans. So who knows? I don't know. I don't know. Something about that actor. I never really loved that actor. I don't know. I can take it or leave it. But um, but overall, the point is, Breen, not Klingons. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? All right, let's now move on to my last two ways in which I would rewrite Discovery.
Each season is 10 episodes long.
So these last 2 points will probably be a little bit shorter. Uh, yeah, I've been saying this all throughout the show that there were too many episodes. When they finally did condense it to 10, that was the best season. And I think the biggest issue with having too many episodes was the pacing. Like it completely threw off the pacing. You were trying to tell a story which could have been told in 8 to 10 episodes, but you were dragging it out over 13 or 15 episodes, and it completely threw off the pacing. You end up with some bad filler episodes. Whereas if each episode or each season rather is 10 episodes, then it's more concise, it's more to the point. And this is what they did for Strange New Worlds, Picard, and Lower Decks, all 10 episode seasons. Now Picard has its own issues separate from that, um, but it works for Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds. I don't know why you wouldn't have just made Discovery a 10 episode season show from the jump, and you end up with a more concise form of storytelling that you did get finally in season 5 when they finally decided to do that. So in my rewrite of Discovery, every season is 10 episodes. See, this was a quick one. Now we're going to jump into my fifth and final thing. So let's go ahead and do that.
For the love of God, develop the damn bridge crew characters.
So the last thing that I would do, yeah, is to make the background characters more relevant, make the bridge crew more relevant. Now, this I think is the least important of the 5 things. I think if you didn't do this, if you did the background characters, the bridge crew exactly the same way that you did in the actual Discovery, um, and did these other 4 things that I said, always start in 32nd century, make the burn better. It's not a mystery box. It's not caused by Kelpian. You substitute the Breen for the Klingons, and you make concise 10 episode seasons. Right there, Discovery is the best Star Trek show, or one of the best Star Trek shows ever. Just for that, just for those 4. So if you leave out this 5th one, I think it's still a great show, but this makes it even better. Let's not wait until the end of season 5 for Reese to start kicking some ass. Like let's see Reese kicking some ass earlier on, and let's not change the bridge crew at the end. And let's develop if we're In my rewrite, if there's still room for Arium, which I'm not sure if there would be or not, but if we still have the whole Arium thing, we develop her more so that when she dies, it's even more powerful, and the funeral scene is earned because we've actually seen the characters interact with her. Um, Maybe have to get better actors. I'm sorry, some of those actors were just, I feel like they weren't, on the same level as our main crew, and that's why they didn't get a lot of scenes. I don't know. But I don't know, Reese was kicking some ass at the end. Like, that is in the beginning. So I think this is a no-brainer. I think a lot of people have talked about this. One of the biggest criticisms of the show. So yeah, pretty simple fix. I think that you develop the bridge crew better. Um, and then with these five things all put together, you have, in my opinion, one of the greatest Star Trek shows ever made, if not the best Star Trek show ever made. Wait a second, wait. Hold on. One more thing. The bonus thing, number six. The line yum yum never happens. Yum yum, not a thing in my rewrite. Carry on.